Chair.
Took my pen. Minister, we are reverting to clause 4, which was stood down. We had reached the point of, we had dealt with the amendment as proposed by Senator Mark, and now we're dealing with the amendment as proposed by the Minister of Finance. We had dealt with that already.
So we're on which one, 4?
Clause 4, your amendment.
Yeah. I have sought advice, I've consulted, but it's a little complicated because in the President's terms and conditions, there is a reference to a housing allowance in lieu of accommodation. And the point was made to me, suppose the President's residence was destroyed by fire, by earthquake or something, then the President would have to seek accommodation and be entitled to a housing allowance. So for now, I'd like to leave it. As I said, I give the Senate the assurance that we will, when we're coming back with the amendment to incorporate senators without portfolio into the pension scheme, that I will have enough time to look at that, but I'd like to leave it for now, because in the president's terms, there is a provision for housing allowance in lieu of accommodation. So I'd like to leave clause 4, amend as proposed in this amendment here.
So you're leaving in the words personal allowance?
No, take out personals, I'm sorry. You're very sharp, Madam President. Remove the words personal allowance and. That really is a colonial relic, I accept that. That is true. That should go. So out in 4, we take out the words personal allowance and. Okay, and then make the amendment that I am proposing here to make it clear that a retired president who opted for 3/4 can only get 3/4 of the upgraded pension.
Senator Hussain?
Thank you very much, Madam President. And for the record, Madam President, we are not in support of this particular clause of the bill. The both Part A and B, Part A being the inclusion of the housing allowance to calculate the pension as the definition of salary. And secondly, there is no existence of indexation of pension against inflation with respect to any other workers in this country, Madam President, and I am saying that we are totally against this, especially in this harsh economic time with so many persons who have lost their jobs and the failing economy, Madam President. We cannot, in any good faith whatsoever, support this particular amendment.
Madam
Minister of
President,
Finance.
I do think I gave Senator Thompson, IE, the assurance that indexation of other pensions must come when we can afford it. Okay? Must come.
So, honorable senators, the question is that clause 4 be amended as circulated by the Minister of Finance and further amended at 4A by deleting the words personal allowance and. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. No. I think the ayes have it. Honorable senators, the question is that clause 4 as amended now stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. No. I think the ayes have it. Clause 4 as amended now stands part of the bill.
Clause 5.
The question is that clause 5 stand part of the bill. Senator Mark, you have circulated an amendment.
Yeah, Madam Chair. Again, this is even worse than what we have just dealt with. The Prime Minister, as the Honourable Minister has intimated, does not receive a housing allowance. There is no provision whatsoever in the SRC report delineating or designating that any amount for housing. The Prime Minister is provided with full accommodation and paid for by taxpayers. So it is really completely out of line, is totally inexplicable for us to include, Madam President, a provision for housing. We remove personal allowance as well as housing allowance for this particular office holder. We do not believe that those things should be included.
So, Minister of Finance.
Fact is, Madam Speaker, the Prime Minister's emoluments as they currently exist are anomalous. Other high office holders, the President, who is higher than the Prime Minister, the Chief Justice, who is just a little bit below, they get fully furnished accommodation or housing allowance in lieu. I made the point that you could have the destruction of the residence of any one of these three people by some natural disaster. It could be a fire, it could be an earthquake. And therefore, the person would have to seek alternative accommodation and get the housing allowance in lieu. It is clearly an oversight. if the SRC in its wisdom overall in many, many years had looked at the fact that there is a president's house and had decided that there may be a time when president's house is not available and therefore they would provide a housing allowance in lieu. And similarly for the Chief Justice, who's entitled to supergrade quarters. Again, they'd looked at that and said there may be a time when a Chief Justice is unable to access state housing and therefore they have a housing allowance in lieu. It is clearly an oversight with respect to the Prime Minister. He doesn't get it now, but who knows, it may be an option in the future in lieu of state accommodation. Who knows? I don't know. So therefore, I'd like to leave it as is. The person will not get it at this point in time.
Senator Hussain.
Madam President, it is irresponsible for us to include a benefit that does not exist in law. Madam President, for the President, when you look at the SRC report, you see that there's a $28,000 housing allowance. For judges, the same. For the Chief Justice, 28, Pusin Judge, 24. But for the Prime Minister, there's no value of a housing allowance. How can you then include housing allowance as part of the salary? It is totally unacceptable.
Senator Hussain, though, I think we are right now dealing with Senator Mark's
Yes, please.
amendment. Senator Mark's proposed amendment is to delete the clause in its entirety.
Yes, please, Madam President. And I'm saying that I want it to be deleted entirely because we are not agreeing to any increase for the Prime Minister's pension whatsoever, and especially based on this ground where the salary definition is used to calculate the pension. Personal allowance is gone, and we are asking for the housing allowance to also be deleted. And I stand firmly on this ground because, as I say, it is an obscene clause in this entire
Senator
bill.
Hussain, please accept my guidance as we move through the committee stage, okay? Minister of Finance, do you have anything else
Yes, I do.
to add?
I do. In the other place, several UNC MPs asked me to make sure that retired prime ministers, of which the only two who have retired are UNC, benefit from these provisions. So I don't know which section of the UNC I'm supposed to listen to.
President, I don't know if that is true because I looked at the entire committee stage and I don't think that is true whatsoever. This is not any
your
self-serving
thoughts
house for
are not
anybody to
imposed.
confer any benefit upon themselves, Madam President.
Senator
It's just to
Hussain.
correct the record.
Senator Hussain?
Yes, please.
Okay. I will now put the question on the amendment as proposed by Senator Mark. Honorable Senators, the question is that clause 5 be amended as circulated by Senator Mark. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. No. I believe the noes have it. The amendment as proposed by Senator Mark is therefore not accepted. Minister of Finance, do you need to speak further on your proposed amendment?
Yes, Madam President. I
Yes.
was actually accused by UNC MPs of victimizing the former two retired UNC prime ministers by not ensuring that they would get these benefits. I was accused by opposition MP for Orpochis of being malicious and victimizing Ms. Besessa and Mr. Pandey by not affording them the improved pension benefits. I just want to put that on the record. And what we're going to do here is take out the personal allowance. As I said, it is clearly an oversight because in the same way the President is given housing in lieu, the Chief Justice is given housing in lieu, and it obviously contemplates a situation where the official residence of the Chief Justice and the official residence of the President are not available, and the person has to seek their own accommodation and therefore get a housing allowance in lieu. That could easily happen to the Prime Minister as well. As a fact, I remember when the current residence of the Prime Minister was being constructed, they had demolished the old one, and then deceased Mr. Manning had to seek alternative accommodation at that time, and that was an anomaly. And we in fact had to have a cabinet decision. I was a member of the cabinet, so I can speak with authority that when the old Prime Minister's residence was demolished, Mr. Manning had to seek an alternative accommodation, and we had to sit as a cabinet and make arrangements for that because it did not exist. That situation where that residence was demolished and there was no residence of the Prime Minister did not exist in the SRC recommendations, and therefore we as a cabinet had to make a cabinet decision to provide the kind of financial support that was required for Mr. Manning at that time. And he was out of the residence in St. Anne's, the old residents, for over 6 months. So I can speak from experience. It is clearly an oversight, because there will be times when these state official residences are not available. So I'd like to keep it as is.
Senator Hussain.
Thank you very much, Madam President. And for the record, in the other place, an amendment was moved by the Leader of the Opposition to delete this entire clause. So it is not entirely correct for the Minister of Finance to come and say that there was victimization. The Leader of the Opposition moved an amendment to delete this particular clause that dealt with the Prime Minister's Pension Act amendment, Madam President. For the record,
Madam
we do not
President, I
support
need to
this
respond to
particular
that.
piece of legislation. I gave you your time, I didn't interrupt. Madam President, when you look at this, this is also again an amendment with respect to indexation, and we cannot agree with this amendment for the reasons stated before. It is quite misleading what the Minister is saying, Madam President, with respect to this, and we believe again this is a very obscene amendment and clause with regards to our economic situation. And for the record, we will not be supporting this particular clause.
Senator Mark.
Yeah. Madam Chair.
No, please, members, we are almost, we are nearing the end of our deliberations. I would ask members to please hold it together, and please let me be able to hear what is being put forward, okay? Senator Mark.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I think the Honourable Minister would agree with me that nowhere in the law and nowhere in any report is there a provision of housing allowance for an incumbent Prime Minister. If it is that the Minister is suggesting that the incumbent needs to be, that particular allowance needs to be looked at, then this matter should be referred to the SRC for deliberation, because they do deal with housing allowances as reflected in their report. But for us as legislators to be speculative on a matter of what may take place in the future, which currently does not exist in law or in a report, I think it is highly irresponsible. And therefore, Madam President, I cannot and we will not be able to support any such proposal for inclusion of a housing allowance, as well as what my colleague said earlier about indexation.
Senator Amin.
Thank you, Madam President. I just want to join in agreement. The example given by the Minister with former Prime Minister Patrick Manning, at the time, he was a sitting Prime Minister. This is not an instance of a retired Prime Minister. So whereas that does not add to doesn't strengthen your argument. But Madam President, the other offices that are being considered, the Chief Justice and the President, there is a housing allowance already in place. And the opposition has indicated that we cannot support something that is based upon a non-existent provision.
Okay, I think, yes. Minister of Finance.
I just want to reiterate, the public record will show that opposition MP Rudal Munilal accused me of victimizing UNC retired prime ministers and demanded that I fix. And in fact, this amendment we're on right now, this one, they demanded and the opposition leader made the point that there will be retired prime ministers who took the reduced pension, and she wanted to make sure that we were not going to victimize a retired prime minister who took that option by not incorporating an amendment of this nature. And this amendment, to make it crystal clear that the retired prime minister will get 3/4 of the upgraded pension, was actually in response to something the leader of the opposition, UNC, requested of me.
So, honorable senators, the question is that clause 5 be amended as circulated by the Minister of Finance, and further amended at 5A by deleting the words personal allowance and. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no.
No.
I think the ayes have it. Honourable Senators, the question is that Clause 5 as amended now stand part of the bill. Those in favour say aye. Aye. Those against say no. No. I think the ayes have it. Clause 5 as amended now stands part of the bill.
Clause 1.
The question is that Clause 1 stand part of the bill.
Take out the word in recognition of the government's agreement, the listening government, who listened to the independent senators. Well, I did. That's who I listened to. They made very good arguments. They weren't political, they were intellectual, and they made sense. Okay? So I listened to the independent senators. And in recognition of the very powerful arguments of the independent senators, I wish to amend the title of the bill to delete the words freedom of information. It's gone.
Honourable Senators,
Just for the record, I would just like to recognize every single stakeholder, every single NGO, every single citizen, opposition,
Senator
MPs
Hussain,
and parliamentarians.
Senator Hussain.
For the record, Madam President,
No,
who
Senator
expressed
Hussain.
concern.
No, Senator Hussain, not at this stage, please. Okay?
I was just responding to the minister, please.
Senator Hussain, please. Honourable Senators, the question is that Clause 1 be amended by deleting the words freedom of information.
And the long title too. That's not clause 1, the actual long title itself.
That will be consequential amendments.
I don't need to say that?
No.
Okay, fine.
That is my understanding.
It's okay. I will.
Honourable Senators,
defer.
the question is that Clause 1 be amended by deleting the words freedom of information. Those in favour say aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. The question is that Clause 1 as amended now stand part of the bill. Those in favour say aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. Clause 1 as amended now stands part of the bill.
The schedule.
The question is that the schedule stand part of the bill. The question is that the schedule now stand part of the bill. Those in favour say aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. The schedule now stands part of the bill. Just one second. Okay. Honourable Senators, the question is that the bill as amended be now reported to the Senate. Those in favour say aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. The bill as amended will now be reported to the Senate. Minister of Finance.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I wish to report that a bill entitled the Miscellaneous Provisions, Tax Amnesty, Pensions, Freedom of Information, National Insurance, Central Bank, Companies, and Non-Profit Organizations Bill 2019 was considered in Committee of the Whole and approved with amendments. I also wish to report that the title of the bill was amended, since we took out freedom of information, to read as follows. An act to provide for a tax amnesty in relation to certain revenue laws and to amend the Retiring Allowances Legislative Service Act, Chapter 203, the President's Emoluments Act, Chapter 250, the Prime Minister's Pensions Act, Chapter 251, the Judges' Salaries and Pensions Act, Chapter 602, the National Insurance Act, Chapter 3201, the Central Bank Act, Chapter 7902, the Companies Act, Chapter 8101, and the Non-Profit Organizations Act 2019, Act Number 7 of 2019. I now beg to move that the Senate agree with the committee's report, Standing Order 69-1.
Honorable Senators, the question is that this Senate agree with the committee's report on a bill entitled the Miscellaneous Provisions, Tax Amnesty, Pensions, National Insurance, Central Bank, Companies and Non-Profit Organizations Bill 2019. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. No. I think the ayes have it. Minister of Finance.
Madam President, I beg to move that a bill entitled An Act to Provide for Tax Amnesty in relation to certain revenue laws and to amend the Retiring Allowances Legislative Services Act, Chapter 203, the President's Emoluments Act, Chapter 250, the Prime Minister's Pension Act, Chapter 251, the Judges' Salaries and Pensions Act, Chapter 602, the National Insurance Act, Chapter 3201, the Central Bank Act, Chapter 7902, the Companies Act, Chapter 8101, and the Non-Profit Organization Act 2019, Act Number 7 of 2019, be read a third time and passed.
Honorable Senators, the question is that a bill entitled An Act to Provide for a Tax Amnesty in relation to certain revenue laws and to amend the Retiring Allowances Legislative Service Act, Chapter 203, the President's Emoluments Act, Chapter 250, the Prime Minister's Pensions Act, Chapter 251, the Judges' Salaries and Pensions Act, Chapter 602, the National Insurance Act, Chapter 3201, the Central Bank Act, Chapter 7902, the Companies Act, Chapter 8101, and the Non-Profit Organizations Act 2019, Act Number 7 of 2019, be now read a third time and passed. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no.
No, any vision, ma'am.
Mr. Khan?
Yes.
Mrs. Gopiskun?
Yes.
Mr. Rambert?
Yes.
Mr. Sinanan?
Yes.
Mr. Moses?
Yes.
Mr. Hussain?
Yes.
Ms. West?
Yes.
Mr. Lahant?
Yes.
Dr. Henry?
Yes.
Mr. Singh?
Yes.
Mr. De Freitas? Mr. Cummings?
Yes.
Mr. Young?
Yes.
Mr. Ennis?
Yes.
Mr. Boris?
Yes.
Mr. Mark?
No.
Ms. Haynes? No. Mr. Amin?
No.
Mr. Hussain?
No.
Mr. Obika?
No.
Mr. Sobas?
No.
Mr. Richards?
Yes.
Ms. Schott?
Yes.
Mr. Vera?
Yes.
Dr. Diyal Singh?
Abstain.
Ms. Dionaran?
Abstain.
Ms. C. Prasad?
Abstain.
Mrs. Thompson-Nai?
Yes.
Ms. Phillips?
Yes.
Madam President, results of the division are as follows. 20 members voted for, 6 members voted against, and 3 abstentions.
Honorable Senators, the result of the division is as follows. 20 members voted for the bill, 6 members voted against the bill, and 3 members abstained. The bill has therefore been passed.
A bill entitled, An Act to Provide for a Tax Amnesty in Relation to Certain Revenue Laws and to Amend the Retiring Allowances Legislative Service Act, Chapter 203, the President's Emoluments Act, Chapter 250, the Prime Minister's Pension Act, Chapter 251, the Judges' Salaries and Pensions Act, Chapter 602, the National Insurance Act, Chapter 3201, the Central Bank Act, Chapter 7902, the Companies Act, Chapter 8101, the Non-Profit Organizations Act, 2019, Act Number 7 of 2019.
Leader of Government Business.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Madam President, I beg to move that the Senate do now adjourn to Monday, the 24th of June, 2019 at 1:30 p.m. We will be dealing with 2 bills on that day. An act to amend the Petroleum Act and Petroleum Production Levy and Subsidy Act, and an act to amend the Firearms Act. Okay.
Honorable Senators, before I put the question on the adjournment, leave has been granted for 2 matters to be raised. Senator Mark.
Thank you. Yeah, Madam President. The first matter I want to address deals with the need for an appropriate investigation for determining the causes and holding persons to account for the numerous cost overruns on recent capital projects under the Tobago House of Assembly. Madam President, there is an absence of accountability in the Tobago House of Assembly as it relates to capital projects. What we have witnessed is a situation where major projects have been undertaken by the Tobago House of Assembly, and there appears to be little concern for the effective management of these projects, resulting in what can only be described as obscene cost overruns on some of the projects that I would like to identify this evening, tonight. Madam President, I draw to your attention the Shore Park complex. This project has an amount spent in excess of the original estimate, amounting to $900 million. That's a rough estimate of the cost overrun for one project, Shore Park Complex. And Madam President, it is business as usual in Tobago under the Tobago House of Assembly no one has been held accountable, no one has been held responsible for this huge cost overrun. In the case of the Victor Bruce Financial Project or Complex, which was built some time ago, the estimated cost overrun was close to $100 million. In the case of the Scarborough Library, Madam President, another project undertaken by the Tobago House of Assembly, the cost overrun is estimated or has been estimated at over $200 million. The Charlottesville Fishing Facility, the excess amount of money spent when compared to the original estimate is some $7 million. And when it comes to the Scarborough Hospital, Madam President, the cost overrun that we have is close to $700 million. So, Madam President, when we look at the hospital on laundry, there's another cost overrun in excess of $10 million. So we are talking, Madam President, sorry, Mr. Vice President. Sorry, Mr. Vice President. My apologies, sir. Yes, Mr. Vice President, we are talking about just about 2, 4, 6 projects, and we have already a cost overrun of close to $2 billion. This is a substantial cost overrun. It is a substantial amount of money. And Mr. Vice President, there has been no accountability in Tobago for these huge cost overruns. And you know what we understand is going to take place? This government has now given the THA the all clear to go and raise money on the open market in light of all that I have outlined here, Mr. Vice President. So there's need for accountability in the Tobago House of Assembly. Mr. Vice President, I have been advised that as we speak, contracts are being issued to selected person without any advertisement, no tendering or invitation to tender. And that has to do, Mr. Vice President, with agricultural access roads, repair to bridges. It is who you know in Tobago, and if you belong to the PNM, you get a contract without tender. Mr. Vice President, that cannot be right. There is need for more, there is need for accountability in that place called the Tobago House of Assembly. And the people of Tobago are communicating with us because they are fed up with what is taking place in that particular island. And they want the UNC to speak on their behalf because the people who represent Tobago in the parliament are silent on these cost overruns. So we have to take up the battle for the people of Tobago. Mr. Vice President, I believe the time has come for the government of Trinidad and Tobago to launch a criminal forensic audit into the finances of the Tobago House of Assembly. We cannot continue how we are going, Mr. Vice President. We need to take action. The people need to know how their monies are being spent, who is accountable, who is responsible. And therefore, I bring to the attention of this honorable Senate tonight, part one of a scandal in Tobago. And we are calling on the government, the Minister of Finance, to take action. And the first stage is for us, 1 minute, sir. The first stage is for us to call and demand that we have a criminal forensic audit into the Tobago House of Assembly as it relates to these huge cost overruns taking place. Mr. Vice President, I thank you very much.
Minister in the Ministry of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Mr. Vice President, the motion as published talks about the failure of the government to launch appropriate investigations for determining the causes and holding persons to account for the numerous cost overruns on recent capital projects under the THA. A wider net you cannot find, Mr. Vice President. There's no specificity in the motion itself as to what capital projects we're talking about, what overruns there were, if any, the basis for determining that there were overruns. So, Mr. Vice President, this motion as crafted reminds me of a very popular song by an even more popular Caribbean artist called Robert Nesta Marley. I throw my corn, but I ain't call no foul. So you just throw things out there with no specificity and waiting to see who will stick their neck out to eat corn so that neck is exposed. Mr. Vice President, on the last occasion when we dealt with motions, fortunately we missed the last occasion, but the one before that, there was a motion on the THA which was equally vague. And I had indicated to Senator Mark at that time that based on the fact that the Tobago House of Assembly is a semi-autonomous body, responsible for preparing its own accounts, responsible for its own policy on finance, responsible for and complying with its obligation to file annual returns and financial returns, and they are up to date in those filings, that there was an avenue through the Parliament Joint Select Committee process to interrogate the Tobago House of Assembly in a manner that can deal with all the minutiae that he's concerned with. If, on the other hand, Senator Mark wishes to raise his questions through this House, through this forum, he needs to give the government some specificity to allow us to do the research and to respond to the questions in a responsible manner. I thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Senator Mark.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Vice President. Mr. Vice President, the other matter I would like to bring to your attention and to this honorable Senate's attention is the need for the government to commission an audit to determine whether the $37 million being spent on Virgin Atlantic Airlines and British Airways for increasing tourism in Tobago is achieving its objective. Mr. Vice President, the taxpayers of this country, in an effort to lure tourists from Europe to Tobago, has been buying what is called airlift, essentially. And what has happened, Mr. Vice President, is that as it relates to Virgin Airlines, this airline flies passengers, tourists, to Tobago. But every year, the Tobago House of Assembly pays to the Virgin Airline owners $21 million. In addition, Mr. Vice President, the taxpayers of Trinidad and Tobago pay to British Airways some $16 million on an annual basis to transport tourists from Europe, more so London, into Tobago. Mr. Vice President, over the last 3 years, we have spent a total of $122 million between those two airlines, Virgin Airlines and British Airways. And as I said, Mr. Vice President, the bulk of the money is to buy airlift. The question, Mr. Vice President, is this: are we getting value for our money? This is why, Mr. Vice President, we need to get from the government whether they have done an audit to determine the $122 million that have been expended on these two airlines in the past 3 years to increase tourism in Tobago. What has been the results? What are we achieving? Mr. Vice President, are we paying money to these airlines and we are not getting, for instance, the appropriate numbers of tourists? This is why I have raised this matter, because there's no data. I don't have any data available to me and to the people of this country so that we can understand, Mr. Vice President, whether this expenditure of taxpayers' money is worthy of being continued, Mr. Vice President. And this is why I'm calling on the Minister in the Ministry of Finance to commission an audit to determine whether this $122 million every year for the past 3 years, $122 million have been spent. And I'm asking the Honorable Minister in the Ministry of Finance to explain to this Parliament and to the taxpayers what value have we gotten in return? What have been the returns in terms of foreign exchange, in terms of revenue generation? If we are putting out $122 million in 3 years, how is that generating returns? What kind of returns are we generating? So, Mr. Vice President, I have raised this matter on the expenditure that we are committed to paying and making to Virgin Airlines and to British Airways, and call on the Honorable Minister and the government to account, to tell us, Mr. Vice President, whether the monies that we are expending to increase tourism in Tobago is achieving its goal, is achieving its objective. If it is, Mr. Vice President, I am happy for the people of Tobago and for the people of Trinidad and Tobago. But we need to get data. We need to get information. And in the absence of information and data, I am forced to bring this matter to the Parliament so that the Minister of Finance can account to the taxpayers for this expenditure and to tell us what revenues we are getting in return for this expenditure, as well as the kind of foreign exchange that this country is earning as a result of this investment. These are the areas, Mr. Vice President, I wish to bring to the attention of this Honorable Senate and to seek answers from the Minister in the Ministry of Finance on this investment in tourism by the people of Tobago and by the people of Trinidad and Tobago. It is taxpayers' money. We need answers, and we need the answers today. Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President.
Minister in the Ministry of Finance.
Mr. Vice President, the United Kingdom market is the largest single market source for visitor arrivals to Tobago, accounting for half of all international arrivals for the past 5 years. According to the data from the research unit of the Division of Tourism, arrivals from the UK market accounted for 48% and 47% for 2016 and 2017, respectively. Currently, the market is served directly by 3 airline service providers, namely Thomas Cook, Virgin Atlantic, and British Airways. Thomas Cook is a winter charter and operates a once-weekly flight out of Manchester in the north of England. The flight is shared with Barbados, where Tobago is the second stop on the route. The service runs from November to March and lands 14% of arrivals from the UK market. British Airways currently operates a twice-weekly flight from London Gatwick and Tobago. The flights are shared with Antigua. During the winter, the flights operate on Mondays and Fridays, and in the summer on Tuesdays and Fridays. British Airways also operates 5 flights per week between London and Port of Spain, which are shared with St. Lucia. Visitor arrivals to Tobago on the British Airways service was above $20,000 back in 2008, but declined steadily to approximately 8,000 in 2013. However, arrivals from the UK on the British Airways service have been growing annually consistently from 2014 up to the end of last year. The historic performance of the flight has always been heavily influenced by the level of funding, primarily and to a lesser extent by the frequency of service, so that the lowest performing intervals would have had 1 flight per week and shorter seasonal rotations with commensurate lower levels of funding. The growth from 2014 has been fueled by increased funding and marketing and a constant year-round twice-weekly service. Virgin Atlantic runs a year-round service between the United Kingdom and Tobago. This flight has been in operation from May 2003 and has contributed approximately 5,900 passengers at its peak in 2016. The service is now twice weekly in the winter months from November to mid-April and reduces to once weekly from mid-April to October annually. All flights are shared with St. Lucia, where Tobago is the second stop on the route. Virgin Atlantic has a seating capacity of 266 and has been serving Tobago for more than 10 years. However, the service was cancelled by the airline back in April 2014 when Monarch commenced operations. The flight was reintroduced in March 2015 and has remained to date. There is no significant difference in the airline seat pricing between the 2 carriers. Both airlines are termed legacy carriers in the marketplace and serve the destination with a triple range of seating capacity. In addition, both operators provide shared service with other destinations where Tobago is the second stop on the route. The arrival times from the source markets are similar, and so too are the relative departure times from Tobago, allowing for an easy comparison. From an operational perspective, both airlines service passengers through their respective affiliate tour operators. As a result, neither destination possesses an advantage over another other than the dynamics of demand. However, the Tobago House of Assembly has decided to maintain the regime of subsidization of the two primary airlift providers, as has existed from 2014, for the following reasons. One, a new strategic thrust has been engaged by the THA towards the transformation of tourism in Tobago. This new direction has comprised the establishment of the Tobago Tourism Agency Limited, the development of a roadmap for growth, the launch of a new brand and marketing strategy, and the allocation of an increased budget to fund marketing and product development initiatives commencing from 2018-19. The United Kingdom market is the largest market for international visitor arrivals to Tobago, and any disruption with airlift in that market can potentially have an adverse impact on the performance of the sector with significant implications. 3, with the new direction of tourism promotion, the THA intends over time to reduce the destination's reliance on subsidization of international flights. 4, growth in the tourism depends critically on accessibility of Tobago from international markets, increases in investment by internationally recognized brands, and confidence in the destination to deliver on good value for money. Any attrition at this time would undermine those key variables and with negative consequences. 5, the current composition of the accommodation stock and the demand that it commands is not sufficiently strong to avert subsidization of airlift. This has been the case for Tobago for many years in the past, and until we create a much stronger demand, which we are working towards, there will be a necessity for subsidization at some level. Taking the above factors into consideration, the THA recognizes the necessity to maintain the status quo with regard to the subsidization of airlift on British Airways and Virgin Atlantic, and continue to work diligently towards growing the demand for the destination of those markets. Mr. Vice President, I will just close by reminding this House and the public at large that if the members of the opposition had not chased away Tobago's best chance of increasing the profile of Tobago in the tourism world by chasing away Sanders, we may not have had to continue paying the cost that we have to pay to bring airlift into Tobago. And I thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Honourable Senators, before I put the question, I now invite senators to bring greetings on the occasion of the Labor Day celebrations to be held on Wednesday, June 19th, 2019. Minister of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries, sorry.
Mr. Vice President, thank you for the opportunity for me to recognize the celebration of Labor Day in Trinidad and Tobago. Mr. Vice President, is normally a time when we recognize our trade unions, our trade union leaders, and workers across the country in recognition of Labor Day. But Mr. Vice President, in the context of the bill that was just passed, in particular the bill that seeks to treat with former legislators, I want to use the opportunity to recognize the contribution of trade union leaders in this Parliament. Going back to the Legislative Council of 1956 to 61, Mr. Vice President, we saw the entry of Alexander Chamberlain Alexis, AC Alexis, by one vote out of Labray into the Legislative Council. He was joined by Bade Sagan Maraj, the All Trinidad trade union leader, and by the celebrated APT James, who came via Tobago through Southwest into the Legislative Council. 1961 to 1966 will see the entrance of Nathaniel Critchlow, to be followed by the militant John Rojas from the OWTU, who fought Texaco and made headlines in that time, and thereafter Carl Tull and Vernon Glean, who in my mind were inseparable. Carl Tull, always seen in his dark shades, Glean alongside him, both members of the Trinidad and Tobago Labour Congress. In the 1971 to 76 Parliament, we had Nuevo Diaz, also from All Trinidad Trade Union, and James Manswell, the legend from the Public Services Association. 76 will, of course, bring in the ULF and a series of trade union leaders in that group. Of course, Basdev Pandey would go on to be Prime Minister. We had Ramesh Lakshmi Diyal and Paul Harrison from Akau. We had Rafiq Shah from Trinidad Island White Cane Farmers Association. Budram Jatan, whose brother Sam Jatan is also a well-known chutney singer, but Budram, in his own right from Longdonville, was a trade unionist. Through the PNM, Mahadev Jagmohan, Mr. President, served in both on the government side and in the opposition later on. He was the labor relations officer of our party and had a distinguished career as a trade unionist. And of course, we all know Jarat Narayan, who was my predecessor in the Ministry of Agriculture, but rose to that position as a daily paid worker in the Ministry of Agriculture, Horticulture Division, and later one of the new representatives representing the horticulture branch in the ministry. Sam Maraj, from General Secretary of All Trinidad Union, would serve in the Parliament and also go on to serve in the court. We have Michael Anisette from SWWTU and our own Rennie Dumas, who was a representative of the Trinidad and Unified Teachers Association. And in more recent time, Mr. Vice President, as I close, in the current Parliament, but before that in the past Parliament, Vincent Cabrera from the Bank and Industrial Workers Trade Union, who is now serving on the Industrial Court. And in the current Parliament, Mr. Vice President, we have our illustrious friend, Senator Wade Mark, on our side, and one of the few female trade unionists who have served in this Parliament, Mr. Vice President, our own Jennifer Baptiste Primus. And in the other place, Mr. Indar Singh, former president of the All Trinidad Trade Union, and Dr. Munilal, former education officer of the All Trinidad Trade Union. Madam, Mr. Vice President, I'm reminded, sometimes I forget, of our own Anthony Garcia, former president of TUTA, the Trinidad and Tobago Unified Trade Unions. I just thought, Mr. Vice President, we should use the opportunity. And of course, I forgot Mr. McLeod, who made history as part of that 76 to 81 team representing OWTU. So, Mr. Vice President, it's a good opportunity on Labor Day to recognize the contribution of our trade union leaders, our trade unions, and our workers, but in particular, to recognize their contribution in the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago, going back to the Legislative Council, right up to today's Parliament. I thank you very much.
Senator Mark.
Thank you very much. Mr. Vice President, may I join with my colleague in recording on this 82nd anniversary of the founding of the modern trade union movement. May I join with my colleague in extending solidarity greetings to the workers, the trade unions, and the general working class in our nation. Mr. Vice President, today, 82 years ago, on June 19th, workers in the oil fields, led by Chubal Uriah Buzz Butler, initiated a series of riots and strikes. This, of course, led to far-reaching social, industrial, and political consequences in this country and indeed other parts of the region. Mr. Vice President, abject poverty, unimaginable levels of exploitation, oppression, dehumanization, triggered widespread unrest and strikes in the oil fields in the railways, on the sugar estates, among other sectors in our society during that particular period. As we fast forward to our modern era in Trinidad and Tobago today, collective bargaining is literally under assault in this country. The right to join and form trade unions is also under attack. And today, Mr. Vice President, less than 20% of the organized workforce belong to trade unions. Mr. Vice President, workers' rights were fought for and defended by the heroes of the labor struggle and the founding fathers of the modern trade union movement, such as Uriah Butler, Adrian Colarienzi, Captain Arthur Cipriani, Elmer Francois, just to mention a few, who all struggled to advance the living and working conditions of our people. Today, as we celebrate the 82nd anniversary of the founding of the modern trade union movement, our economy continues to totter. We continue to experience rising levels of unemployment and underemployment. The cost of living continue to grow. We experience increasing inequality in income and wealth in our country, not to mention, Mr. Vice President, the absence of safety and security for our people because of the growth in this crime and violent environment that we are part of today. The government has continued to brutalize the working class and the ordinary people. We have witnessed the closure of Petrotrin, TSTT, and several other important state organizations and enterprises. But the struggle continues. And therefore, Mr. Vice President, on the occasion of the 82nd anniversary of the modern trade union movement, we in the United National Congress wish to extend to all trade unions, all members of the working class, all working people, a militant and a powerful Labor Day 2018. We wish to take the opportunity to extend to you, Mr. Vice President, and to your family, and to the staff of this Parliament, and to the officers of the Parliament, a wonderful, a powerful, a peaceful Labor Day 2019. In closing, I want to wish all my colleagues a powerful, a wonderful, a peaceful, a happy, a reflective, a positive, a progressive Labor Day 2019. And as we would say, Mr. Vice President, in the labor movement, long live the trade union movement, long live the labor movement, long live the working class of our country. Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President.
Senator Richards.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. As I join my colleagues, just to give some history, Labor Day celebrations in Trinidad and Tobago was declared an annual national holiday in 1973. Celebrated on June 19th, it is the anniversary of the day of the Butler oil field riots, which took place in 1937. Prior to this time, there were ongoing tensions between workers and employees in many sectors in society. These were characterized by situations of worker abuse, underpayment for labor, racism, economic depression, and considerable falls in the standards of living of what were described as the working class. Between 1937 and 1937, workers became more influenced by a need for change, resulting in strikes and riots on the sugar plantations and the oil fields. And in September 1937, the Oilfield Workers Trade Union also became the first registered trade union in the country, representing the rights of those in the petroleum industry. The social unrest then extended throughout the Caribbean and gave rise to several prominent labor leaders in Trinidad and Tobago, such as the well-known Tubal Bus Butler, Captain Andrew Cipriani, George Weeks, Albert Maria Gomes, Adrian Cola Rienzi, Elmer Francois, and C.L.R. James. During a labor dispute on Port of Spain wharves in November 1919, Captain Arthur Cipriani called on the workers to withhold their labor, which resulted in their first important industrial strike in Trinidad and Tobago. George Weeks, another well-known trade unionist, possessed a powerful political leadership style, which moved people toward a confidence to stand for what was just and right. He gave them a vision that planted seeds of liberation to move beyond salaries and working conditions, along the road to self, worldview, economics, and governance. Albert Maria Gomes became a city councillor and legislator who fought for social and political justice for the people of Trinidad. He was also a supporter of the literary and visual arts. In 1931, he founded a magazine called The Beacon, which provided a forum for well-known figures such as C.L.R. James, and which led to the recognition of excellent literary works in later years from writers such as Earl Lovelace, Merle Hudge, and many others from Trinidad and Tobago. Adrian Cola Rienzi served as the mayor of San Fernando in November of 1939 and administered the borough for 3 consecutive terms until November 1942. He was a member of the Franchise Committee, which was appointed in 1941 and strongly advocated universal adult suffrage. St. Vincent-born Elmer Francois became a founding member of the National Unemployed Movement and its more radical successor, the Negro Welfare, Cultural and Social Association, to which she devoted the rest of her life. Regarded as one of the most celebrated thinkers of Trinidad and Tobago and the whole Commonwealth Caribbean, C.L.R. James was against colonialism and against racial prejudice in all its forms. He began to formulate his thoughts on a just and classless society. Apart from his contributions to politics, his passion for poetry and literature rewarded him with the nation's highest decoration then, the Trinity Cross. And then we come to, of course, Tubal Bus Butler, a Grenadian immigrant who worked in the oil field, who was instrumental in the development of the labor union movement, which emphasized the importance of collective unionism in treating workers' discontent and the abuses they faced by employers. Butler was awarded the nation's highest honor, the then Trinity Cross, as the country's main highway has been renamed in his honor. Today, a statue of Butler stands at the Faizabad Junction, also known as Charlie King Junction, the place where police attempted to arrest him on June 19th, the day of the historic riots in 1937. The labor struggle and movement in Trinidad and Tobago is a shining example of how a divided society at one point can be forced or can find common ground. It's an example of how we can only make progress as a nation by uniting on what is in the best interest of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. It harkens back to an old Sparrow song. I know many of colleagues quoted songs earlier on. Indians and Negroes unite. I'm not going to put the melody to it at all. We have won the battle called human rights. On this occasion, we pay tribute to the leaders, the workers, and those who have sacrificed blood, sweat, and tears on the road to nationhood. Because as our national motto describes, the only way we can move forward is by together we aspire, together we achieve. On behalf of these 9 independent benches, it's my honor to bring tribute and say a happy, fruitful, and productive Labor Day celebrations 2019. Thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Honorable Senators, I too wish to bring greetings on the celebration of Labor Day, a time in our nation's history that commemorates the struggle for, as simply as I can put it, a better life. As we commemorate the triumphs of those who led and bled for the struggle, let us renew our commitment to the rights that they fought for as we advance to a society where discipline, tolerance, and production can result in the access to a better life for all. Happy Labor Day. I now invite senators to bring greetings on the occasion of Corpus Christi to be held on Thursday, June 20th, 2019. Minister of Public Utilities.
Mr. Vice President, I'm pleased to bring greetings from the government bench on the occasion of Corpus Christi. Mr. Vice President, Corpus Christi is the feast when the Catholic community and some members of the Christian community celebrate the true presence, not just the symbolic presence of Jesus in the Eucharist, also known as Holy Communion. As Christians, we believe that what we receive in Holy Communion is the body of Christ. The cup, or more accurately, what the cup contains, sanctified by the Word of God, is the blood of Christ. By these, the bread and wine, Jesus Christ wanted to entrust us with his body and blood, which he shed for the forgiveness of our sins. With his body and blood within us, the church challenges us to be authentic witnesses of Jesus Christ. Madam President, as an authentic witness, Mr. Vice President, as an authentic witness, some of the applicable virtues we are called upon to embody and strive to adopt in our daily life centers around the breaking down of egos and hidden agendas and being more forgiving and generous to others so that we could be one with each other and build stronger communities. On behalf of the members of the government bench, I extend warmest greetings on the occasion of Corpus Christi, and may we all continue to strive to be a little bit more Christ-like in our daily lives. I thank you.
Senator Haynes.
It is my honor, Mr. Vice President, to extend greetings to the Roman Catholic community and indeed the nation at large on the occasion of Corpus Christi. I also wish to recognize other Christian communities that commemorate the most holy observance of the body of Christ. On this day, we celebrate the Eucharistic covenant, and that those of us who practice the Catholic faith enter into with Jesus Christ. The Eucharist is a symbol of Christ's perpetual selfless love, a love of mercy and sacrifice, and a love of service to others. On this day, we are called to renew our commitment to the covenant, a total offering of our lives in love to God. Let us remember a love of God is a love of service. We are reminded of our worldly mission to live godly lives, lives guided by love, and to encourage others to do the same by our example. In Trinidad and Tobago, this love for our fellow man is evident in our ability to live in peace together, regardless of our various religious beliefs, cultural practices, or ethnic identities. Corpus Christi is also a day on which we reflect on renewals, particularly new life. It reminds us that in every new day, there is a chance to make a different decision and chart a new and better course forward. It is a common practice in Trinidad and Tobago to plant fruit-bearing trees on this day as a nod to new life and sources that sustain life. It is fitting that Corpus Christi marks the beginning of our rainy season here in Trinidad and Tobago. As we begin our new seasons, whether it be at work, school, or on a matter of personal development, let us endeavor to make the best out of it. It is my hope, and indeed the hope of the United National Congress, that this spirit of renewal extends beyond the church and throughout our daily lives. May the love of service to one another be replenished and renewed on this Corpus Christi, and may God bless our nation. I thank you.
Senator Thompson-Aye.
It looks like bread. It tastes like bread, but it's not bread. It looks like wine. It tastes like wine, but it is not wine. Transubstantiation, the miracle of the Holy Eucharist. Corpus et Sanguis Christi. On Maundy Thursday, this sacrament of the Holy Eucharist was instituted. But it was a sad time. It was indeed his Last Supper, the Last Supper, and we knew that the next day it would be the crucifixion. So this sacrament was not celebrated, instituted with pomp and ceremony and happiness. But we needed a time when we would commemorate this great feast. So we have this holy feast, Corpus Christi, where we celebrate with a pomp and ceremony, where we venerate this holy feast. In Trinidad and Tobago, we walk in procession, carrying the holy body and blood of Christ in the monstrance. And I don't expect to hear people talking now because they should know better. As we walk in solemn procession, we say our prayers. There is some other traditions. Some don't throw corn, but they plant corn and peas. We celebrate the transformation of the body and blood of Christ from the bread and wine that it was. And as we transform our lives, we ask that we should be less human and more divine. We have both natures. We remember that we are the branches and he is the vine, and indeed divine. On behalf of the independent bench, I bring greetings to all of you and to all Trinidad and Tobago for a happy, holy feast, and not just transformation of the Christian and the Catholics, but the entire society. We call to be much more than we are. Thank you.
Honorable Senators, I too wish to bring greetings on the occasion and observance of Corpus Christi. It is a liturgical celebration of Christ's death and resurrection that emphasizes the joy of the institution of the Eucharist. It is interesting to note that the occasion of Corpus Christi is unique in several ways. Through a vision, it was born from the mind of an Augustinian nun by the name of Saint Juliana, who subsequently became desirous of having a feast within the church devoted specifically to the honor of the Holy Eucharist. Despite this desire, it was not acted upon for 20 years, and I can only presume, like so many of us today, it was due to the fear of following one's dreams. Nonetheless, once she acted upon her dream, its inception occurred in the 13th century AD, and after more than a few unfortunate setbacks, it became widely celebrated throughout the entire church in the 14th century AD. The motivation behind the dream, besides unwavering faith, was a feeling by Saint Juliana that Holy Week was often seen as a time of great sorrow and repentance, and the Eucharist should be a time of rejoicing. As I reflect on the history of the celebration, I cannot help but take away the following lesson. A dream or vision acted upon has the potential to surpass or extend beyond the life of its creator to the greater good of all. To the Christian community, I wish a merry celebration and a happy Corpus Christi. Honorable Senators, the question is that this Senate do now adjourn to Monday, the 24th of June, 2019 at 1:30 p.m. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. This Senate now stands adjourned to Monday, the 24th of June at 1:30 p.m.